afterwards, we sat down and we talked about what are the real differences between Islam and Christianity. And I said, well, we do respect Jesus and we respect his sainted mother, but we don't believe that he was God. And they said, well, we don't either. We believe he was a wonderful human being, but we don't understand how he could have been God at the same time. So without dawah, in a sense, that journey towards what makes sense is already well underway.
Yes, yes.
And one doesn't have to get too angry and polemical. And if you are, people tend to get angry and polemical back. It's kind of, aggression is usually counterproductive. And again, the Quran does say, وَقُولُوا لِلنَّاسِ حُسْنًا, say to people what is most beautiful. And that doesn't mean using 4-letter words and YouTube chat boxes. That's not the way to melt hearts, really. That just exacerbates the ego, which is what we're trying to get beyond. So, yeah, people are joining Islam quietly. We get about 1 conversion a week registered at our main mosque in Cambridge, which I used to think was amazing. But last week I met somebody else who said at his mosque in London they get a similar number. So we'll have to look at what the census return looks like when they've crunched the data that they got a couple of months ago. But for the previous census, they reckon there's about 100,000 converts to Islam in Britain.
100,000?
Yep. And that you can correlate by looking at the number of people who click the box Muslim, but also click the box that says white, Anglo-Saxon, Irish, or whatever. If you put those together, that's the number you get to. And I expect it'll be a larger number this time. But that happens really without da'wah. It happens just because people are looking for what is, they find something in Islam, something about its timelessness. They like the form of worship. They like the uncluttered simplicity of the mosque. They love the fact that Muslims united in their ibadah and that it's uncompromising. Ramadan is difficult but impressive. 5 daily prayers, difficult but impressive. There's a seriousness about it that makes them think, well, this is a real religion. This looks like God's religion because it's not constantly being sweetened and diluted by anxious synods. But it's.
I remember when I was a Catholic, before the reception of the Eucharist, the central rite of the church on a Sunday, usually one has to fast. For a whole hour, whole 60 minutes from food. And I know I'm not. I don't mean to say it to mock, but I'm just juxtaposing that with the realities of Ramadan and and anyway, it's just how different things are.
I think that those things which make people shake their heads, why don't we get with it and become modern and like everybody else, are those things that are quite irresistibly attractive to a lot of seriously minded people, which is why the mosques are full. Everybody's talking about the crisis of Islam. Well, we do have a lot of crises, but if the church where my ancestors used to worship in Norwich is now a mosque,
is it?
Well, which religion is in crisis?
It's one thing I've always noticed. The mosque. The problem with the mosque is they're always too full. There's always two, and the average age of the attendees of mosque is very young. The average age of your average Church of England or Roman Catholic Church is the opposite. We're talking about, as you say, lots of grey hairs. That's the typical story in my opinion.
It's very, a Jummah prayer is crowded and it's a dynamic event, and Laylatul Qadr in a mosque is overcrowded and an even more sensational event, and people take that seriously. So it's kind of self-perpetuating, and I see no sign of that really flagging anywhere in Europe.
Right.
There's places in Albania that were subject to communist forced secularization for so many decades that people have forgotten what a mosque is for, where things are flagging a bit. But really, you have to adopt the Inquisition approach. Islam prevailed in Spain after the Muslim conquest. Within 100 years, most people had converted. After the Christian reconquest of Spain, it took them hundreds of years to winkle out the last pockets of Muslimness. And they had to use the Inquisition with all of its horror. And, they were still discovering Muslims in Spain in the 18th century. So a friend of mine who lives in Granada recently had his house rebuilt, and the builders found on the ground floor a couple of skeletons that were facing the Qibla.
Wow.
And they were thought to be 18th century. So that family had kept up the traditions in secret, risking being burnt at the stake for many generations. So that's the kind of resilience of Islam. It doesn't die away quickly. Because it's the religion of fitra. People love the idea of monotheism. They love the idea of a timeless, beautiful, simple, quite short form of worship. What's not to like? Of course, on the surface, you have the Taliban and ISIS and crisis after crisis, which is what the media tend to report. But it's a kind of mirror image of the West. In the West, on the surface, everything is nice. But underneath, you have a demographic crisis. You have the environmental crisis. You have the crisis of loneliness. We now have the world's first Minister of Loneliness in the UK.
Really? I didn't know.
Yeah, because society is fraying so fast. So that's the society into which Muslims are being invited to integrate. So there's certain things that are still rough and ready, but still more or less functional. The Muslim family, the Muslim neighborhood, the place of worship, the idea of gender, these things are still maintained despite everything. But the surface, of course, which the media reports, is uproar, constant uproar. But beneath the surface, there's stillness.
But what about? I mean, I don't mean to go on. This is a separate subject. I don't want to go into it all now. But what about the second generation, the third generation of Muslim immigrants, the offspring of the? Are they retaining the faith, or are they hemorrhaging all over the place and will disappear like water in the sand, or will they retain their? Well,
in the book, I do talk a little bit about retention, and there's been some sociological work done on it. So. 26% of Christian parents statistically can expect their children to be churchgoers if they are churchgoers. 26%. Right. In the case of Muslims, it's 71%, which is not 100%, but still a rate of survival. Plus the converts, plus big families means that the mosques are likely to be well used for some time to come.